I just knew it. All right. Today, section 6, it's called the fundamental theorem of algebra. And basically, that's what we talked about in the warm-up. Whatever we have as our degree, that's the number of solutions we'll have for each answer. Okay? So our goals today are to use the fundamental theorem of algebra. We're going to understand and use conjugate pairs of complex zeros. And we're going to write polynomial functions given the zeros. So the fundamental theorem of algebra says this. If n is the degree, okay, so it's something to the n power of a polynomial f of x, then f of x will have exactly n zeros. Okay, it'll have exactly n zeros. Now the thing that we need to understand though is that we can have imaginary zeros. Okay, so that's a chance. Hey, we look at the graph, and I'm supposed to get 5 answers, but maybe I only have 3 actually real zeros. Well, they could be imaginary. Another situation would be repeated zeros, and we talked about this at the beginning of last class. Was that if I get the same answer twice, let's say I get x equals 2 and x equals 2, well, that's the same zero, right? So we need to account for those as 2 separate ones, even though they're actually the same thing. Okay? So here we go. It says, hey, find the zeros. We're going to do p and q. And again, p would be our factors of our constant. So factors of 9 would be 1, 3, and 9. In last class, guys, I had some questions saying, hey, Mr. Cole, it's -9. Does that matter at all? And the answer is no, okay? Because remember, p over q, we have to take plus or minus anyway, so we're actually taking them into account. So q is our factors of our leading coefficient, which is 1 and 2. All right, now remember we need to do p over q. So we're going to do plus or minus 1 over 1, 3 over 1, and 9 over 1. Plus or minus 1, plus or minus 3, plus or minus 9. All right, and now we're going to take them and put them over 2. So plus or minus 1 over 2, which is 1/2. Plus or minus 3 over 2, which is 3 over 2, which is 1.5. Plus or minus 9 over 2. So how many possible answers do we have here? 12, because remember they're positive or negative. Now, how many answers are we going to have here, though?
4.
We're going to have 4 of them. Okay, we're going to have 4 answers. Okay, so here we go. Graph that on our calculator. Go, please. Again, my calculator doesn't work yet. I need to get that fixed. I need to take my computer to tech help. Graph that. And we're looking for where the graph crosses the x-axis. And more specifically, we're looking for whole numbers. Where does it cross exactly? Because that will get us started. So that's our x button right there. We're going to type that one. That's our exponent to the 4th power. Now we need to get the over button. I don't have the graph in front of me, but where about does it look? Sam, did you say 3? Would you guys agree with Sam?
Yeah.
3? Is there another one?
-1.
They're both 2 negatives and 1 positive.
Here, do you just want to take a quick peek at that? Wow, how do you think you're
So you're looking at 3. What about -2?
-1.
Or is that -3? Excuse me. 3 and -3? Would you guys agree there?
Yeah.
And then is -1 maybe?
Yes.
Okay. So we're going to start there. We're going to start with one that we know for sure. Let's do 3. So I'm going to synthetically divide. Am I missing any zeros?
No.
I'm not. So 2, 3, -17, -27, -9. Okay, I'm going to bring down my 2. multiply to get 6, add to get 9, multiply to get 27, add to get 10, multiply to get 30, add to get 3, multiply to get 9, and add to get 0. Here's a question. Okay, I'm going to propose. What if I don't get 0? You've made a mistake. You've picked the wrong number, which also could mean you graphed it incorrectly. Maybe you put plus 17x squared instead of minus 17x squared. Just a small error can throw the whole thing off. Okay, that's great. Now, from here, where did we normally go? What did we normally do from here?
Inputted it for it's like 2x to the third, 9x squared.
Okay, so we've got x would have x minus 3, right? And then would have, let's see, this is my constant, 3 is my constant, 10's my x squared, x cubed. So I'd have 2x cubed plus 9x squared plus 10x plus 3. And then we'd try to morph that, right? Here's the deal. We've got 4 terms here. Now, maybe we could try to factor by grouping, but here's what we're going to do. We're going to pick another 0 that we know for sure. Was it negative 3, 1?
Yes.
So what I'm going to do, maybe I can use a different color, maybe you guys can't, but I'm going to keep going with it. I'm going to pick another 0, and I'm going to synthetically divide again. Because I can't factor that yet. Okay, we want to keep going until we can factor it. So I'm going to bring down my 2, multiply to get negative 6, add to get 3, multiply to get negative 9, and add to get 1, multiply to get negative 3, and add to get 0. Now, this is 2x squared plus 3x plus 1. That's a little bit better, isn't it? So my 2 factors that I've proven to be true are x minus 3, x plus 3, and now I'm left with 2x squared plus 3x plus 1. Now, let's morph this. Factors of 2 times 1, so we're doing factors of 2 that add up to 3. Factors of 2 are just 1 and 2, aren't they? They add up to 3. So now I'm going to factor this by grouping. So 2x squared plus 2x, I'm going to use 2x and 1x, plus 1x plus 1. Cut it in half, factor by grouping. Factor out of 2x, I'm going to be left with x plus 1. Factor out just a positive 1, so I'm left with x plus 1. My 2 factors are 2x plus 1, x plus 1, and don't forget my 2 others that I found earlier, x minus 3 and x plus 3. So, I've got 4 answers, which I said to be true earlier. X is going to equal 3, x equals negative 3, x is going to equal negative 1, and x equals opposite of that number divided by that number, negative 1/2. And again, we can go back to our graph to verify that. I think negative 3 and 3 were apparent. Negative 1, I think I heard someone say, and then there should be another one between 0 and 1, or excuse me, 0 and negative 1. Questions here? 3, negative 1, and negative 1/2, are they all on our list? They are. Okay, questions here? So up until this point, we hadn't really done an x to the 4th problem. It's just been x cubed. So we would do it once, and then we'd be able to factor. Well, now we're going to have to do it twice. Okay, moving on. It's x to the 5th. So now we're thinking how many answers? There's going to be 5 answers. Okay? Alrighty, so p and q. P is factors of our constant. Factors of 8 are 1, 2, 4, and 8, right? Our q would be just 1. So here we're going to do plus or minus 1, plus or minus 2, plus or minus 4, plus or minus 8. Okay, go ahead and graph that, please. Okay, since my graphing calculator doesn't work, does yours look something like this?
Yeah.
How many zeros do we see on the graph?
2.
I see 2 of them. I see one of them that occurs right there and another one that occurs right there. What do we know about that one though?
It's not exact.
Is it exact?
Doesn't.
I think it's just touching because it's negative.
Okay, it's just touching. I think it is exact, Tristan. But remember what I said last class, that if it bounces, some of them will go through and some of them will bounce. And this is when we have a double zero. Okay, so if we have a situation where it just bounces off my zero or my x-axis, that's going to be a double situation where we're going to have, I think it's -1. We should have -1 twice. Okay, so I know I'm going to have a zero at, what is this, 2?
Yeah.
So I'm thinking it's going to be 2, and then this one's over here at -1, and actually, since it bounces, it's going to be a double. So right now, I've got -1, -1, and 2, so there's 3 of my 5. But like we said earlier, my degree is 5, so I need to get all 5 of them. Okay, and that's why we can't just look at the graph, because not all of the zeros are present. Okay, so here we go. We're going to synthetically divide. 1, am I missing any terms here? I am, aren't I? I'm missing the x to the 4th. So I'm going to put a 1 for the x to the 5th, 0, 1, -2, -12, -8. And let's try 2. So I bring down my 1. And I'll just say it doesn't matter if we do -1 or 2 right now. It doesn't. So bring down my 1, multiply to get 2, add to get 2, multiply to get 4, add to get 5, multiply to get 10, add to get 8, multiply to get 16, add to get 4, multiply to get 8, add to get 0. Okay. So again, this is 1x to the 4th plus 2x cubed plus 5x squared plus 8x plus 4. I'm not factoring that. Let's do another one. I'm going to use -1 this time. Bring down my 1, multiply to get -1, add to get 1. Multiply to get -1, add to get 4. Multiply to get -4, add to get 4. Multiply to get -4, add to get 0. Okay, I'll just say this. At this point, I have 1x cubed plus 1x squared plus 4x plus 4. I could factor that by grouping. Okay, you could stop and factor by grouping, or you could just synthetically divide. Again, remember, we have a double root at -1, so we're going to use that thing again. How do I know it's a double root at -1? Because it bounces off the x-axis. So bring down my 1 here, multiply to get -1, add to get 0, multiply to get 0, add to get 4, multiply to get -4, and add to get 0. Okay, so I have x minus 2 from earlier, all the way up here. I have x plus 1 from earlier. And I have another x plus 1. I'm running out of room, but now I'm left with, this is my remainder, constant x and x squared. I'm left with x squared plus 4. What do I need to do here? Can I factor this? Can't factor because there's no sum of squares, is there? It's only difference. So like Ralphie said earlier, I'm going to take x squared plus 4 and set it equal to 0. And I'm going to solve for x. I'm going to minus 4 on both sides. I'm going to get x squared equals negative 4. Square root both sides. When I square root a negative, what do I get? I get an I get imaginary. And that makes sense because if I look at my graph, I only have 3 zeros. Well, we need 5. Square root of 4 is 2. So this is going to be plus or minus. Remember, we put the square root in ourselves. Plus or minus 2i. So my 5 answers are x equals 2, x equals negative 1, x equals negative 1, and x equals plus or minus the square root of 2i. Excuse me, plus or minus 2i. Questions, comments, concerns there? Okay, guys, we got about an hour left of class. I'll be talking for like another, hopefully 15, 20 more minutes, and that's it. Now, this next idea says, hey, we're going to take the zeros, the answers, the solutions to the problem, and we're going to work backwards and get a polynomial. So essentially, we're working backwards. Those other problems, we had a polynomial and found the zeros. Now we're going to find the zeros, work backwards to find the polynomial. Okay, now this one I've got x equals 3, x equals negative 1, x equals negative 4. So if this is a 0, what is the factor that goes with it? Negative 3, right, Hannah? X minus 3. Since it's positive 3, well, we need to flip our sign. So x minus 3 is a factor, x plus 1 is a factor, and x plus 4 is another factor. So those are my factors, and what we're going to do, guys, is we're going to multiply them together. Okay? Multiply them together, and then we should get our polynomial. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with these two. I'm going to FOIL those. X times x is what? X squared. X times 4 is 4x. 1 times x is plus 1x. And 1 times 4 is 4. So if I combine my terms, I get x squared plus 5x plus 4. Any questions so far? And now I'm going to multiply that times x minus 3. So I'm going to take x times everything in the second one. So x times x squared is x cubed. X times 5x is plus 5x squared. X times 4 is plus 4x. Now I'm going to go to the next one and say negative 3 times x squared. And remember, I'm going to do this thing where I'm going to put them underneath. So negative 3 times x squared is negative 3x squared. Negative 3 times 5x is negative 15x. Negative 3 times 4 is minus 12. And now I can add them together. I get x cubed plus 2x squared minus 11x minus 12. So if you were to graph this polynomial in our calculator, the zeros should be at 3, negative 1, and negative 4.
How did you get the green? The equation of the green?
Yeah, good question. So to get the red here, I took x times all of those. To get the green, I took negative 3 times each of those. So I take the x first, and then I take the negative 3. That answer your question?
Yeah.
Questions there at all? Okay, now these next two. Guys, we know that whenever we put the square root in ourselves, we have to take into consideration the positive and negative values. Okay, so if we have a square root as a root, it's always going to come in twos. Okay, and that's called a conjugate. Repeat after me, conjugate. Conjugate means it's going to come in twos, okay? So yes, I have 3, and then this idea of 2 plus the square root of 5 as another 0, but I know I'm also going to have 2 minus the square root of 5 because, again, it's going to be its conjugate, okay? So there are my 3 zeros. So those are the zeros. So the factors are x minus 3. And I'm going to write these differently a little bit. I'm going to write them with brackets, and you'll see why here in a second. I'm going to write x minus 2 plus the square root of 5. And x minus 2 minus the square root of 5. Are there any questions about how I wrote that? Again, if there's a square root or an I, it's gonna come in pairs of 2, so we can just, it's the opposite sign. So since this was already plus square root of 5, I just did the opposite sign, which was minus. Now, we need to multiply all those together. And here's how we're gonna think of these. I'm gonna think of x minus 2 as one thing, okay? It's one thing, okay? That way we can FOIL. So just for simplicity's sake, I'm going to erase that for a second. You guys can keep it, but I'm going to erase it so it doesn't confuse you guys. We need to FOIL these together. Okay? So I want us to think of x minus 2 as they're married. It's connected. So we're going to think of that as one thing and that as the other. That is one thing, that is the other, so we can FOIL. So it's like x plus 1, that's one thing, that's the other, that's one thing, that's the other. Well, x minus 2 we're going to think as one thing. So when I FOIL that, I'm going to take x minus 2 times x minus 2. What's x minus 2 times x minus 2? It's going to be x minus 2 squared. Right? X times x is x squared, so x minus 2 times x minus 2 is just x minus 2 squared. Yeah, this is fun. Now, I'm going to take x minus 2, when I FOIL, times the outside, so x minus 2 times negative square root of 5. So that's going to be minus x minus 2 times the square root of 5. Now, could I write minus square root of 5 times x minus 2? Yeah, you could. I usually don't put anything after a square root though. So that's why I put this in front. You could put it the other way. Now I'm going to take my inside when I'm FOILing. Square root of 5 times x minus 2. That's going to be positive because a positive times a positive is a positive. Positive x minus 2 times the square root of 5. Cole, you really want to pay attention. This is hard. I'd shut a computer. It's the hardest thing we've done this year. What's the square root of 5 times the square root of 5? See, I take that back. What's a positive times a negative? Negative. It's a negative. What's the square root of 5 times the square root of 5?
25. It's just 5.
It's 5, isn't it? Square root of 5 times square root of 5 is just... Whoa. Whoa. Don't look at the screen. Is just 5. Now, it looks really ugly right now. What do we notice here in the middle? I've got a negative something and a positive something. They're going to go away. That cancels with that. So what do I have left? I have x minus 2 squared and minus 5. It will always cancel like that. Okay? Now, I'm going to expand x minus 2 out. So I'm going to take x minus 2 times x minus 2, and I'm left with minus 5 at the end. So here we go. I'm going to FOIL again. X times x is x squared. X times negative 2 is negative 2x. Negative 2 times x is negative 2x.
Negative 2 times negative 2 is positive 4, and then minus 5. And now I can combine like terms. X squared minus 4x minus 1. So, when we FOIL these two factors, we get x squared minus 4x minus 1. But we're not done, because we have that 0 to multiply by still. So I have x minus 3, x squared minus 4x minus 1. Now lastly, we need to multiply these together, which the hard part's over. So x times x squared is x cubed. X times negative 4x is negative 4x squared. X times negative 1 is negative 1x. Now I'm going to take negative 3 times those. Negative 3 times x squared is negative 3x squared. Negative 3 times negative 4x is positive 12x. Negative 3 times negative 1 is positive 3. So, did I make a mistake?
No, I did.
When I add them together, x cubed, minus 7x squared plus 11x plus 3. So if we started with this and did P and Q and found all of them, those would be our zeros. Okay? Last one. So again, what's I again? I is, it's imaginary. It's the square root of a negative number. So anytime you get a square root, or essentially I, again, it's going to come in pairs of 2. So yes, I have 2 as a 0. I have 3 minus I as a 0. But I'm also going to have 3 plus I. Again, it's always going to be the opposite of that sign. So those are my 3 zeros. So my factors then are x minus 2, x minus 3 minus I, and x minus 3 plus I. Okay? Now, like I did last time, I'm going to use brackets instead of parentheses. You might not be able to have to erase, but I'm going to put brackets there. I should have done that right away. Because I'm going to group the x minus 3 together. Okay, and again, for simplicity's sake right now, I'm going to erase that just to help us think this through. So when I FOIL, again, I'm going to treat x minus 3 as one thing. So x minus 3 times x minus 3 is x minus 3 squared. Then I'm going to take x minus 3 times positive I. That's going to be plus I times x minus 3. Then I need to work on my inside. Negative I times x minus 3. That'll be minus I times x minus 3. And then my outer, when I FOIL, negative I times I is negative I squared. What happens on my inside here? They go away, don't they? Those go away. So I'm just left with x minus 3 squared, which I'm going to write that out. X minus 3 times x minus 3 minus I squared. Guys, what's I squared? It's negative 1. So this is like minus a negative 1, which is plus 1. Okay, when I FOIL x minus 3, it's going to be x squared minus 6x plus 9. Kind of did that in my head a little bit. plus 1, which is really x squared minus 6x plus 10. Are we done?
No.
No, because we need to multiply by our last factor. So x times x squared is x cubed. X times negative 6x is negative 6x squared. X times 10 is 10x. Negative 2 times x squared is negative 2x squared. Negative 2 times negative 6x is positive 12x. Negative 2 times 10 is negative 20. I add them together. X cubed minus 8x squared plus 22x minus 20. How we doing out there?
Great.
I think she's being sarcastic. Guys, the assignment's online. Again, tons of work to be shown, so we better be showing our work. Is there an animal in there?
Is there an animal?